"It's not a big deal," you say through clenched teeth, while your shoulders creep toward your ears and your jaw refuses to unclench. Why do smart people say things they do not quite believe, even when their bodies are broadcasting a louder truth? Defense mechanisms are one answer, and it is more compassionate than it sounds once you hear it fully. They are largely unconscious strategies that reduce psychological pain, steadying us in the short term so we can keep going. They protect the self like a quick umbrella in a storm, though sometimes they distort reality or relationships when the storm has already passed. In Freud's original dynamic model, these defenses mediate conflicts among wish, fear, and conscience, keeping inner pressure from bursting into panic or chaos. Anna Freud gave us the classic catalog, naming patterns like denial, projection, and rationalization, so we could see what otherwise hides in plain sight. George Vaillant later arranged defenses along a rough continuum, from immature and brittle to mature and flexible, emphasizing how context and development shape their usefulness. Think of defenses as the mind's reflexes, learned in hard moments, saving us from pain the way a blink saves an eye from grit. A reflex is helpful when danger flies toward you, yet it can become costly when it fires in safe situations where openness would serve you better. Let's move through 3 layers, from protective but primitive, to neurotic and workable, to mature and transforming, and we will anchor each with a concrete story. First come the primitive or immature defenses, fast and blunt instruments that keep pain out by cutting reality into simple shapes. Denial says, "There is no fire," while smoke rolls across the ceiling and friends cough nearby, because admitting the flames would break your heart. Projection says, "You hate me," when the unspoken feeling in the room is your own resentment, displaced onto the nearest face for relief. Splitting divides people into all good and all bad, allowing loyalty to burn hot until the first disappointment flips the switch to contempt. Here is a story of conflict that turns other people into villains, not because they truly are, but because villainy feels safer than ambiguity. 2 siblings inherit a small family store, and pressure mounts as rent increases and sales sink during a difficult year. The older sibling, terrified of failure and ashamed of asking for help, insists everything is fine while accounts run red, and suppliers call at night. The younger sibling, desperate and anxious, begins to see the older as malicious rather than frightened, projecting rage onto a scapegoat who becomes the perfect villain. They split the world into heroes and traitors, and every discussion becomes a trial rather than a plan, because certainty feels like safety when shame is heavy. Denial snuffs out warning lights, projection turns trembling into accusation, and splitting edits out complexity that might have opened a path forward. These strategies reduce pain for a moment, but the cost is intimacy, coordination, and the nuanced thinking complex problems require. Now the neurotic defenses, still protective but more sophisticated, offering explanations and detours rather than outright erasure. Rationalization crafts a neat story that makes avoidance sound principled, so we can keep our self-respect while dodging the risk we secretly dread. Displacement moves emotion from a dangerous target to a safer one, turning anger at a boss into sharp words at home or honking at strangers. Reaction formation flips feeling into its opposite, producing exaggerated sweetness towards someone who evokes envy, or moral purity that hides a forbidden wish. Meet a character who explains away avoidance as principle, and notice how convincing the story can sound, even inside their own head. A talented analyst receives an invitation to present at a conference, an opportunity that could widen their network and stretch their skills. They craft a thoughtful email declining with a line about refusing to participate in performative events that reward flash over substance. The words feel clean and noble, yet a closer look reveals a thudding heart, a stomach full of stage fright, and a fear of being asked hard questions in public. Their explanation is not false, but it is not the whole truth, and the missing slice is where growth could take root if named with kindness. Displacement joins the party when they spend the afternoon irritated by a colleague's tiny mistakes, releasing tension downward towards someone less threatening. Reaction formation appears when they cheer loudly for friends who present, insisting they never wanted the spotlight, smiling so hard it almost hurts. These defenses keep dignity intact during a scary week, yet they also keep the person small when the world is actually offering them room to expand. Finally, the mature defenses, which do not hide the energy but redirect it, like a channel guiding water to irrigate fields rather than flood the village. Sublimation transforms a raw impulse into useful work or art, turning aggression into competitive sport or honest advocacy, and turning grief into a memorial that helps a community heal. Humor acknowledges the pain, but softens it with perspective, especially when it includes ourselves instead of weaponizing others. Anticipation imagines future discomfort realistically and prepares, not with dread spirals, but with concrete steps and an honest conversation. The same energy that fuels denial or projection can be composted into fuel for growth when we have enough safety and skill to face it. Imagine a young chef who feels an intense rush of rivalry toward a peer whose restaurant is getting glowing reviews across town. At first, they draft a scathing critique that blames trend-chasing and shallow diners, a rationalization that sours the kitchen and scares off apprentices. Then a mentor nudges them to channel that fire into a new menu cycle, a better training system, and a collaborative pop-up that brings both teams into creative dialogue. The rivalry's energy becomes sublimation. Humor shows up in a friendly dish name poking fun at their own competitiveness, and anticipation becomes prep for a fully booked weekend. Maturity here does not mean being above feeling. It means letting feeling do useful work without burning the house down. Before we go further, a respectful counterpoint needs to be voiced, because labels can hurt and life is not a tidy diagram. Calling someone immature can stigmatize rather than help, especially when their defenses were forged inside real danger, where other options were scarce. Defenses often saved us when we were young or cornered, and dismissing them ignores the courage and ingenuity that kept us afloat. Maturity is contextual, shifting with culture, history, and power. The way you protect yourself at home may differ from how you must protect yourself at work. A humane approach asks, what did this defense make possible then, and what might serve me better now? Let's add an anonymized historical or clinical vignette, told gently and without spectacle, because learning should honor the people whose lives teach us. In a mid-century clinic, a college student kept failing classes despite strong early grades, insisting repeatedly that the professors were threatened by their brilliance. Underneath the brittle pride sat a story of a critical parent, whose affection arrived only with perfect performance, and failure felt like annihilation rather than instruction. Projection and reaction formation had built a hard shell to keep shame away, and therapy offered a slow rehearsal of another strategy. Anticipation joined with self-compassion. The student began planning for deadlines, building study groups and letting humor deflate perfectionism when a mistake slipped through the net. Over time, the psychic immune system calmed, and pride softened into confidence that could tolerate error without collapse. Now a workplace vignette, because most of us meet our defenses not in textbooks, but in meetings and Slack threads where tone can sting. A product team adopts a running joke that every comment from the research group is feedback theater, and sarcasm becomes the air they breathe. They laugh hard to hide the churn in their stomachs, because somewhere under the sarcasm is a fear that they will be told their favorite ideas are weak. Sarcasm functions like a group shield, a shared displacement that aims dread at an abstract enemy while keeping vulnerability off the table. A new manager notices the nervous laughter and tries an experiment, naming the fear plainly and offering a structure that separates critique of ideas from value of people. They model humor that includes themselves, joking about their own attachment to a doomed feature. Then anticipate discomfort by setting time limits and breaks for emotion check-ins. Slowly, the team discovers that honest feedback actually reduces anxiety, because the monster behind the door shrinks once the door opens. Let's gather the common mistakes so we can avoid them with care rather than guilt. One mistake is turning defenses into insults, using words like projection or denial as weapons that shut down conversation rather than open it. Another is diagnosing friends or partners in heated moments, which invites defensiveness and shame instead of curiosity and growth. A third is treating defenses as fixed traits rather than flexible strategies that emerge in specific contexts and can evolve with safety and practice. Here is an application kit designed to be simple and respectful because the goal is awareness and choice, not self-attack. For 1 week, notice headline subtext moments, what you said as the headline and what you felt as the subtext written in a few honest words. Do not analyze to exhaustion. Just collect headlines and subtexts and see whether patterns cluster around particular people, topics, or times of day. Choose one repeated defense to swap for a more adaptive version, and write the swap on a card so your future self has a prompt during stress. If projection shows up, practice perspective taking by writing 3 plausible motives the other person could have that are not hostile or contemptuous. If rationalization papers over avoidance, try a values-based decision by naming the underlying value you care about and one small act that honors it this week. When displacement pushes anger onto safer targets, move the energy to exercise, a walk, or a direct but measured conversation with the true target when appropriate. Add a micro-practice of humor that includes yourself rather than weaponizes others, like saying, "There goes my inner defense lawyer again," with a smile that invites warmth. Humor that punches down inflames the immune system. Humor that punches in gently invites the immune system to rest without shame. Keep the swaps tiny and trackable, because big promises collapse under stress, while small rehearsals build new reflexes you can trust. Let's return to where we began, with the clenched jaw and the phrase, "It's not a big deal," spoken into a room that already knows otherwise. Sometimes that sentence is a shield we still need for a minute, and respect for that need prevents us from ripping it away too soon. But often the shield is leftover armor from an old battlefield, and loosening the straps now can allow breath, nuance, and connection. A helpful metaphor is the psychic immune system, working tirelessly to keep the self from infection by shame, fear, or loss. Like the body's immune system, it is vital, yet overreactions can harm the host, causing inflammation where healing would do. Our work is not to shut it off, but to calibrate it, so protection and openness can coexist without constant civil war. Sigmund Freud gave us the first sketch of this system. Anna Freud organized the patterns that still guide our language. George Vaillant mapped how these strategies can mature across a lifetime. Contemporary psychology reminds us that context matters, that cultural stories shape what feels dangerous, and that safety unlocks better defenses more than scolding ever will. So ask yourself with gentleness, which defenses protected you once, and which are overdue for an upgrade that keeps their benefits without their unintended harm? Which conversations do you avoid by turning others into villains? And what would happen if you traded certainty for curiosity for just 5 minutes? Which explanations feel noble but hide a tremor of fear? And could a values-based step move you toward the life you actually want? Which energies could be sublimated into craft, play, service, or learning, so they build rather than bruise? What version of humor would invite connection rather than status? And who would feel safer in a room where that humor leads? It helped once, it does not have to run everything now. If you enjoyed this video, please like, subscribe, and leave a comment. Good defenses keep us alive, but wise defenses help us live.